Okay, so why don't we take a look at test 37, game number 2. Please take out your book as well as your 4-step method for games. So the first thing I'm actually going to have you do is actually press pause and just read over the first paragraph. Don't worry about the indented sentences, but just read over the first paragraph, get a feel for what's going on. Don't worry about writing anything down for now. And then we'll take it from there. So go ahead and press pause. So notice the first thing we're going to do is going to write down the entities. And in this particular case, we have 7 trucks. Yay, trucks. And we're going to write down each of the characters. And that's going to be S, T, U, W, X, Y, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, oh, and Z. So notice we don't just write down the actual letters. We write down the number as well, because the LSAT puts that Z in the second line on purpose. Okay? I've seen many students actually make the mistake of only writing down 6 entities. So we have our number, 7, our type, trucks, and our actual characters, letters. The next 2 sentences within there is just kind of loophole closers. That's what we're going to call them. Generally, what they're telling us is that there are not going to be any ties and that trucks don't arrive more than once. Basically, what they're telling us is that these trucks just arrive once and one at a time. However, notice we also have another set of entities, and those are going to be our 2 colors, G and R. So we've taken down our entities. Okay. Step 2 is to figure out the type of game and create a sketch. Well, notice because we're putting this in order, if you look again to your Games 4-Step Method Training Manual, you'll notice the very first game type is sequencing. This is going to be the most common type of game on the LSAT. And for sequencing, our sketch is going to be slots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. More specifically, it's actually going to be a double sequencing game, for lack of a better term, in that we're going to put the trucks on top of the slots, and we're going to put the colors on the bottom of the slots. This is a classic setup. In fact, I would suggest there's about an 80% chance that you will see a game very similar to this on the actual LSAT. The rules will differ, the questions will differ, but in terms of the type and in terms of the sketch, you can certainly expect to see this on the LSAT. Okay, we've done our step 1, which is writing down the entities. We've done our step 2, which is create a sketch based on the type of game. We are now into dealing with the rules. Step 3, that is writing down the rules. So going into your LSAT training manual for just a minute, please, before we continue on with this game, notice it says game step 3, write down the rules, do the following whenever possible. What you're going to see in this particular game is that we can only really do number 1 and number 2. So notice number 1, it says build the rules into the sketch. And number 2, it says rephrase the rules into blocks. You're not going to be able to do all 8 of these elements for every single game. Some games you'll deal with blocks. Some games you'll deal with if-thens. Some game you'll deal with numbers. But in this particular game, it's just really building entities into the sketch and rephrasing rules as blocks. So what in the world do I mean by that? Well, what I would like you to do, please, is press pause. And I'd like you to just read over those indented sentences, those 5 sentences. Don't worry about writing anything down, but try to get a feel for what they are trying to say. And then I'll show you how we're going to deal with these rules. So go ahead and press pause, please. Okay, so here's how we're going to deal with these rules. First of all, this first rule is a no consecutive rule. And notice that is mentioned in your game step 3, writing down the rules. It's noticed as number 2, rephrase rules as blocks. The second bullet point says no consecutive rules. So right off the bat, this is actually going to be a little bit tricky. Everything from there will be relatively straightforward. But the way we're going to take this rule down is going to be as follows. If we know that the 2 reds are not going to be consecutive, By the way, remember we're putting the colors on the bottom. What this means is that we will have at least one slot in between the two reds. Notice we have R, a slot, and dot, dot, dot. This dot, dot, dot will indicate at least. So I know we'll have at least one slot in between the two reds. Notice, by the way, this is a block. This is what we're going to call a block. Again, for lack of a better term, we have these kind of reds in a certain block. Okay? You'll get used to this concept as we work through all of these games. The second rule we can also rephrase as a block, and that's going to be as follows. Y dot dot dot. Now stick with me here. T/W dot 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 W/T. So notice W and T have to come sometime after Y, perhaps immediately after Y, but we don't know exactly when after Y, and that's why we're going to have that dot, dot, dot. And notice we have T/W dot, 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 T/W, because of course both of them need to come after Y. The third rule. Notice the third rule starts with the word exactly. Okay. So the LSAT means every single word that they say. They mean it literally. When they mean exactly, they mean no more and no less. So generally speaking, we are going to try to translate the word exactly into the word only, just to clarify what they really mean by that. If you notice, by the way, referring back to your training manual, under Game Step 3, write down the rules. Under number 7, it does say translate exactly into only. You won't always be able to do that effectively, but when you can, you're going to want to do that. So basically, this rule is saying only 2 of the trucks that arrive before Y are red. Well, how are we going to take this down? Well, first of all, we know how the reds work. We know it has to go R dot dot R slot dot 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 R. And then we can do dot, 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 Y. In addition, I'm actually going to bracket off these R's, and I'm going to write only 2. I'm going to write only 2 because I'm worried I might forget that you can't have any more than that. Okay? And we'll come back to this word exactly and translating it into only as we do other games. Okay, next. The next rule, well, we can build that right into the sketch. S going 6th. By the way, if we go like that in our sketch, it'll help us more easily see the numbered slots. This way we don't have to write numbers into the slots. Just by putting that line right down the middle, I can more easily see number 4 and number 6 and number 7 and so on and so forth. So this fourth rule that we did is a good example of building the rule into the sketch. The next rule, probably as you figured out by now, is going to be Z dot 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 U. Okay. So notice we have all these blocks here, and it turns out that you want to do far more than just kind of rephrase rules as blocks. So again, if you go to number 2 in your game step 3, write down the rules. And notice we're going a little out of order here. I mean, the fact is that you're going to have to know how to do all 8 of these things and be very comfortable with all 8, and different stuff comes in different orders. But if you take a look at number 2, where it says rephrase rules as blocks, it says combine rules to create blocks. Okay. Well, notice in our second rule and our third rule, we have Y. What we can actually do now is combine these rules to create a nice big block. So what we can actually do after this third rule is add dot, 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 T/W, dot, 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 W/T. In addition, we can now kind of cross out this second rule. Maybe on the day of the test you might erase it, but I just want to cross it out so you can kind of see the progression of how this went. Notice back to our training manual, please. Under, again, write down the rules. Number 2, rephrase rules as blocks. Notice the third bullet point. It states build large blocks into the master sketch. Now, you can't always do this, but when you're given a large block, you want to try to build it into the master sketch, or at least see how perhaps you might build it into the master sketch. So if you take a look at this very large block, notice we have this first slot R, second slot, third slot R, fourth Y, fifth T/W, sixth T/W. Well, if you go up to our master sketch, you'll notice that we only have 7 slots to deal with, and S is already sixth. There can't be that many ways in which we can build this block into the sketch. So why don't we try? Why don't we see how we might build this block into this sketch? Well, let's just start from the beginning and just build an example of this block into the sketch and see what happens. I mean, again, there can't be that many ways to build it in. So why don't we start with, I don't know, R going first. By the way, I do know, but again, this is how you're going to have to look at it on the day of the test. You're going to say, well, let me just try, see what happens. This is kind of the psychology of the test. Let me just see what happens, because I know if I'm writing, I'm doing it right. So I guess, let's see, R could go first, and maybe the next R could go third. Notice that would mean Y would go fourth, and wait a minute. There's only one way to build in this block. T/W would go fifth. W/T would go sixth. So notice there's only one way to build in this block. Excellent. Now, that doesn't always work so well on all of the games, but sometimes it does. And you always want to look to build in large blocks into the master sketch.